and you can ask the questions and they'll show up here during the talk, and we'll take advantage of this during the question and answer session. We'll multiplex between the questions from the live audience and the questions on the screen, so don't feel just because you're here that you can't use this facility. You can also upvote the questions as well if it's your question. I'd like to ask a few framing questions for the benefit of our speakers. How many people here have outsourced some of their emails to the cloud? Of those that didn't answer, how many are considering outsourcing some of their email? So that looks pretty close to 100% of outsourced or considering outsourced. How many people have outsourced their student email system? How many people have outsourced email for other cohorts like staff or faculty? Oh, a few hands, and they're not as high in the air. That may be indicative of it's a more challenging aspect of the war rooms. I'm very pleased this afternoon to have with us representatives of two teams that have either outsourced their email to the cloud or in the process of doing that. I have a representative from the University of Alberta, Rima, and I have a representative from Queen's University, Mike Schmidt. And Eddie, certainly for me, has been a trailblazer, and the University of Alberta's efforts in cloud email have been very informative to my own efforts at Carleton University. And there's two major vendors in the cloud email space. There's more than that, but Microsoft and Google are at the top of everyone's list. And I'm very pleased that we have university representatives who have dealt with both those vendors. So I'd like to ask Gordie if he can start us off for this session.
Sure.
Gordie?
This is on. Thanks, Ben. When you had mentioned outsourcing to the cloud, I'm just wondering if our use of carrier pigeons, because they're high up in the cloud, if that counts, because that's just of our experience. But, and we are going here. Let's do one. Oops. So as Ben has mentioned, at the University of Alberta, we embarked on our journey to the cloud a few years ago now. And we've actually been at previous CANHEITs and other venues to talk about our experiences. And so previously on this channel, we have talked about what our plans were and the roadmap that we were embarking on how to get to that plan. We've also talked about some mid-trip reports, if you will. We've talked about the huge undertaking with respect to information management, privacy, and security. And that's largely to fulfill a lot of the legislative requirements, but then also best practice and our own internal policy. And we had given lessons learned to date. So again, that's previously. And so the intent here isn't to delve back and give the full detail on those prior items, but to set context, we will, at a high level, set some background items. And by all means, if you do want to inquire more or you weren't present at any of those prior sessions I've mentioned, please contact me, and myself or others from our team will be more than happy to share our experience and whatnot. So at a very high level, we were faced with a problem. There was a need, and not unlike most of you here or a lot of higher ed environments, we have extremely decentralized and distributed environment, and that included our email lay of the land. And in fact, as it turns out, we had upwards of 87 different, separate, distinct email silos, and with no integration, with no interoperability. Again, that's 87 within our school. So that's an issue. That's a need. There's cost and budget issues with that. There are functionality and quality control issues with that. There's that lack of integration. And there's also compliance, audit, privacy, and security issues. So for many reasons, we set about remedying this problem. So to start with, we want to get a good assessment of our current lay of the land, and that's where we began identifying numerous systems, much more than we even anticipated. And there was some detailed reports developed, some detailed assessments of possible options. And initially, the intent was to keep it in-house. We thought, okay, a big win for us is going to be to consolidate our environment, and we'll do so on a in-house supported platform. But again, when we started looking at these other options, it became very clear very quickly that the majority of them were cost prohibitive. Some options were upwards of several $1 million of startup costs for the initial hardware and changes to the infrastructure environment. And thereafter, it would also require anywhere from $1 million to several $100,000s annually for the ongoing licensing and other support costs. And in times of budgetary and fiscal restraint and issues, that was a non-starter. So we thought, okay, now what? What are other options to us? And we were thinking also, parallel to this time, that aspect of utility computing. That is, some computing has become very foundational, very basic. And should we be in the business of continually being the full provider of these very basic services? So for instance, you wouldn't operate your own water plant. You wouldn't operate your own power plant and whatnot. So that notion of utility computing. And we thought, it's email at that state. And our assessment showed that email could very well be grouped in that utility computing category. And therefore, it was ripe. It was a good candidate to explore perhaps leveraging from an external service provider. And so initially, we thought, okay, let's keep it in-house as much as possible. So within the province, or definitely within the national borders. And again, at that time, options were either cost prohibitive or they wouldn't solve our issues. They didn't have the full functionality that you see in other services now, perhaps. And so we progressed on in our search and looked at other offerings. And whereas initially there was a lot of aversion to cross-border and to any foreign hosted environments of our information, we thought, okay, let's still ask the question, can we do this? So we embarked on that question of can we do this? And the more we start to peel back layers, the more we thought, actually, this might not be impossible. Perhaps we can do it. Perhaps there's just more hoops and hurdles in some instances. But ultimately, we found that it's the same level of controls that you have to push out to your external service providers, whether they're across the street from you, whether they're in your province, whether they're in the next province, or whether they're halfway around the world. It's still incumbent on that organization to ensure that they, as a customer, own the information. And that number two, the customer and the service provider share the responsibility to execute privacy and security over the information. And number three, that the customer bears the responsibility of ensuring and assuring that service provider adequately executes privacy and security over its information. And again, whether the provider is across the street or in a different part of the world. So we actually embarked on a formal privacy impact assessment with the Alberta Office of the Information Privacy Commissioner, and there's other due diligence steps that we're undertaking as well. And lo and behold, these tasks and these milestones, they started to be accomplished. And as they say at times, be careful what you wish for, because then we actually made it work. The due diligence process, though, truth be told, took in excess of a year and a half from start to finish when we started the official information management, privacy, and security assessment, which included the PIA, included ratifying the contract as well. So that took a year and a half. We started to get things in place. And so then we thought, wow, it's now coming to fruition. Now let's plan to make it so. So currently, the migrations are completed. And again, from that previous slide, when we embarked on that plan, it was going to have to be piecemeal. Because again, of those numerous distributed environments, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. We had to go in and assess each environment, and at times individually, to determine the best means of conducting the migration. And so now we have, Simon, is that correct? 140,000? That's 140,000 accounts we've migrated to our Alberta Google Apps for Education domain. And that's really a high number, but that's another topic for another privacy and security discussion. I see some of my other security cohorts in here. Our migration team is actually in the process of wrapping up now. It's been in the operations phase for about a year now. Not to say that our final migration was completed in 1 year, but in parallel to completing the last of the faculties and departments, it's been in operations for a while. There's continually some ongoing development and customizations of APIs and other functionality. And there are a lot of requests we'll get because there's some third-party and even internal additional Google apps or add-ons and whatnot. And so we'll be receptive to review and assess the business case and whether and how it can be integrated. So the gist of what Mike and I are being called upon is our experience and lessons learned. And so the legendary Jimi Hendrix, who we call his lyric, "Move over, Rover, let Jimmy take over." And that's a parallel to some of what we experienced. And recall that Jimmy, in an altered state of consciousness, came across his dog Rover on the ground and spewed forth that legendary lyric, "Move over, Rover, let Jimmy take over." And the parallel is that we've had to teach a lot of old dogs, new dogs too, some new tricks, or at the least teach them a different means of achieving that same trick. And so the disclaimer is don't take that analogy to heart. We're not, the U of A cohort and I, we're not implying that our sponsors and our faculty and staff are domesticated pets. Again, this is just an analogy, so please don't tweet that U of A calls tweezers dogs. But no. So the experience and the lessons learned, a significant, higher than we first anticipated, level of resources is needed, not only for the initial migration, and again, because each faculty unit may have some esoteric business processes and whatnot that you have to account for to ensure that the migration of the groupware type services will go smoothly and that they will not cause interruption. But then also for the ongoing support. There is some account provisioning and more importantly, if you will, deprovisioning items that we've come across. And so previously, one good thing about having the silos in terms of an email environment is when an employee was leaving, either to go from one unit to another or leaving the university altogether, that individual unit would simply decommission their account on that local exchange or whatever platform they'd have. So now that there's one consolidated environment, and when we have that scenario of a affiliate going from one unit to another or leaving the university altogether, or even wearing multiple hats, so if they enroll in courses and they're also an employee, we're having to reconcile how that one account is going to provide for all the needs and requirements. And as mentioned previously, there's ongoing reviews because of requests we receive for additional functionality. And we have to maintain that due diligence that was started, and that's contingent on our approval from our provincial privacy commissioner, in that any changes to information flows need to be adequately assessed for their impact to university information. And we've had to get used to changes. The changes are the norm. So Google, as you know, does rapidly change and at times change back and change forward. So we've had to become used to that. There's also the generation of information in logs. At times, it's a very manual, labor-intensive process for us now. We're working through some other options. There's available for cost APIs and other items, but for the time being, it's been quite labor-intensive. And that also holds for backup and recovery tasks. At times, our escalations up through the Google support channel have been good. At other times, we've had to be creative and had to knock on other various doors. They have an API for that. So that's often a response that we'll get from Google. But then that said, the support or the documentation around that API isn't always what it needs to be. And their change management process at times has raised some of our eyebrows. And there's no stop, halt, or revert back button, even if we're in the midst of exam period, for example, or the first day of classes. Other lessons learned and items of note. So while they're proponents and expanding their Google Plus features and functionality, however, it isn't supported as within the core feature set for Google Apps for Education, and that in turn makes it extremely difficult for our teams to support. So if you liken it to a honeymoon, naturally all honeymoons come to an end, or I'm guessing they do. I'm assuming perhaps the rich and famous may have ongoing honeymoons, or so many marriages that it keeps going. But in our case, we're at that domestic life phase now, and that said, there's been a lot of upside. There's been a lot of good, and we notice we've actually taken for granted because yes, there's a list of items in the previous slides and whatnot that speak to some of the pain points we've had and whatnot. But overall, the exceptional uptime and availability has been a huge win for us. We never would have been able to achieve that on our own. We definitely did not have that within the many disparate units in the past. We now have full integration and interoperability of our groupware and for communications. Chat has become a huge popular feature used by faculty, staff, and students alike. We have a means now to securely exchange information and records. So without having to email through our drive and whatnot, a person is able to upload and explicitly share documents to only those that they choose, and then they can retract shares or the document altogether. And at times where we are now, we forget that this really was a huge watershed moment for IT at the university. It was the first time we were able to get a major, large-scale, high-profile consolidation and standardization of a utility computing service. And it's actually set the groundwork for other projects and considerations, whereas previously it wouldn't even be on the map or radar. So that was a very quick whirlwind tour of where we have been, how we got on this road and this journey in the first place, our destination to date, the first phase, if you will, and some of what we've experienced on the journey. And again, by all means, if you want more information, lessons learned, or other items, please contact me. I've got Simon Collier here from the U of A as well. He was one of our go-to guys and our project leads for all things Google, and especially Google Apps for Education. So more than likely, if it's on the technical side or on the project side, I'm going to be redirecting to Simon anyways. But make it come in through me, because much like the Canadian or the US governments, we like to throttle all communications and control. Just kidding. I should have been signing on, is what it said. So
Thank you very much, Gordie. And we're going to have time for questions and answers. I'm trying to rectify the fact that this full screen doesn't work. So if you've been posting questions, they're queuing up somewhere, they're just not being displayed. And I'd like to invite Mike Schmidt now. Mike's at Queen's University and he works with the team there. And I subscribe to the theory that there isn't a right answer for your cloud email provider. There might be a right answer for your particular institution. And Mike's going to talk to us about Queen's experience with setting up cloud email, not using the Gmail product that Gordie's team used, but using Microsoft products. Mike?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Gordie. I have a York cup here, and that's, if this doesn't work out, remember that it was some fool named Smith from York. You know. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is what email looks like today at Queen's. Then we're going to go back. How did we get here? And then we're going to talk about where we're going, or where I think we're going. The 1 and 2 is just to make you feel comfortable. This isn't going to take too long. So Queen's has a hybrid environment. And that is to say that we have now got a bunch of people on on-premise Exchange and a bunch of people in Office 365 in Exchange Online. On-premise, we moved our faculty, staff, and grad students. Our room resources are also all on-premise. In the cloud, undergrads. So that's basically what we've got. We also have, and I'm not going to talk about these people because I don't like them. We still have quite a few departmental mail servers. So unlike Gordie, I think U of A, you guys managed to get everybody into the central. We haven't got there yet. This is about the only technical thing I'm going to say. We use ADFS and DirSync to tie our two Exchange environments together. We keep our passwords and identity on campus. So ADFS and DirSync allow us to do all the authentication for both premises, for both environments on premise. And both environments have the same GAL, that's the address book. We publish more content for faculty and staff, but the students, everybody sees the entire address book. Okay, so how did we get here? We actually did this in 3 major projects. Our environment was for email, for faculty, staff, all students, was this thing that we call JES, but I guess it's called Sun Java Enterprise Communications Suite. In terms of calendar, we had Oracle Calendar, and that was only faculty and staff who had Oracle Calendar accounts. We also charged for the privilege. So we had, I don't know, about 1,700 Oracle Calendar accounts for maybe 3,500 faculty and staff. So it wasn't, people who used it really depended on it, but we didn't get tremendous penetration. The first step, I wasn't actually involved in this, but the first project that was really involved in our arc here was a pilot with the School of Business, our advancement people, and our central IT department did an exchange pilot. The second project, which I was involved in, was to move the faculty, staff, and grad students to on-premise exchange. And the third piece was to move the undergraduates to Office 365, that is Exchange Online. So the exchange pilot took about 10 months in 2011. The one thing I can tell you about costs on that was that we spent a lot of money on a consultant or consultants. But a really important thing is that although the environment was only really for, I'm not sure, Matt, maybe 400 or 500 people between the School of Business and advancement. There's a couple thousand. Okay. The environment itself, though, was scaled so that we could move everybody. Coming out of that, one great thing about having that pilot was we were then able to find out what didn't work. And in particular, what didn't work very well was the calendar migration. This project, it took us about 6 months. We started it in January of 2012. And June 30th of 2012, we were incredibly happy to have the thing over. This was difficult. And there was a massive training and communications challenge. The grad students were easy. There was about 6,000 grad student accounts. They were nothing. But faculty and staff, it was a big deal. We started doing our migrations in March. Initially, they were very small. We did things like, groups of 30. We were doing 1 or 2 migrations a week. Over those months, we started to scale it up. There was a huge scheduling effort. So whether you are taking your staff and faculty to the cloud, I don't care where you're taking them, I think you're going to have the same sort of experience that we did, which is you have to spend a lot of time talking to them. You're going to have to do a lot of training with them. We had all kinds of legacy clients that we had to help people move away from, or to try to convince them to move away from. It was a very big job. I'm pointing this out. We spent $30,000 with a company named CalMover, which was extremely well spent. So if you're going to do a calendar migration, take a look at getting somebody to help you with that. The Office 365 migration, this 8 months. So June, we did a little bit of stuff in June. So I say this is significant due diligence, but when I hear what Gordie and U of A went through, this was nothing. So our privacy risk assessment, we first started talking to get a consultant. That was some of the work that was done in June. There was all kinds of meetings and a report and review and all this kind of stuff. That went on. So that whole arc was about 3 months. And I think, Gordie, you said you guys did something like 1.5 years. So, that's an advantage of being not being first in all this stuff. The license negotiations also, again, to us, this seemed to take a long time. The $23,000 there was on an external lawyer to help us talk to Microsoft about some of the provisions in there. When we started this, it was like, here is the contract, Microsoft will not change this. It turned out that actually that wasn't quite true. We did get a few changes in the contract. One of them had to do with liability. I think when we first looked at it, Microsoft said, okay, well, our liability would be $5,000 or something. And our lawyer said, you must be kidding. And they said, oh, okay, well, how about $100,000? So they ended up coming up with, there's a scale that Microsoft put into our thing. So and I assume that this is now for everybody, but depending on how many licenses you have, you fit into one of 3 or 4 categories. The actual migration, we moved 46,000 student accounts in 1 weekend, which, January 26, 2013. We didn't do any training for the undergraduate students. The communications burden was small. Compared to the faculty and staff, it was hardly anything. We relied a lot on other vehicles to get the word out to the students, which is to say the registrar, they have a monthly newsletter that goes to all the students, email newsletter, we use that. Our student government, the AMS, we relied on them to get the word out. As compared to, if I had Nancy Simon here, she could groan about how much, and there was a hell of a lot of work that had to be done for staff and faculty by comparison. Okay, do these things. What do I got 4 minutes. The Office 365 Discovery Workshop, that was a free thing that Microsoft offered us. It was 2 days of technical training. They came to Queens. Well, I was going to say it was money well spent. We didn't spend any money on it. It was time well spent. Learn from your sister institutions. We, very early on, before we had really even decided on Office 365, I think, we spoke to the University of New Brunswick, and they told us, so we had completed, or nearly completed, our faculty and staff migration. And they told us that they moved all their undergraduates kind of in a weekend. And this was like, what? This was inconceivable. The University of Toronto was very generous with us. They had a whole bunch of us down to Toronto, and they had a whole bunch of their people to come and speak to us. Soup to nuts. They had people talking about the communication stuff, the front-end support stuff. They were talking about all the technical background stuff. At that time, U of T was on live at EDU. They also warned us about opt-outs. So the opt-out was, okay, you don't want your email in the cloud, here's an alternative. Now, with U of T, how they expressed that, they were getting more opt-outs than they expected, and it was a question of some confusion over their wording. They changed their wording, they had way fewer opt-outs. Our lesson from this was, we have an opt-out process, but we made it as complicated and as hidden as we could, and consequently, we had something like 10 requests, but part of the process was somebody in our support center would talk to the person. And as it turns out, talk them out of opting out. But mostly, the students aren't afraid of this. So it wasn't a hard sell. The opt-ins was just that U of T, when they did their migration, they let people decide if they wanted to move or not. And so when we went to talk to them, I think they'd been at it for something like 10 months, and they had moved 60,000 accounts or whatever the number was. So we're comparing that in our brains to what UNB did, and it was like, okay, we got to go for the big bang. I've already said this, right? We didn't have any calendars to migrate in with the undergraduate students, but if you do, think about calendar. Watch out for these things. Acquiring licenses. I don't know why this is so painful, but it is. On our first, so I've gone through now 3 times getting licenses. The undergraduates, we were told it was going to take 2 days. I won't give you the details because I'm running out of time, but it took 3 weeks. We then went back recently to get licenses for faculty and staff. And that process also took weeks. And now I've just started up the process to get licenses for alumni, more weeks. Stay away from the start of a term. We initially were going to do this migration on January 2nd. in large part because of our difficulty in getting the licenses, we lost 3 weeks, and we then had to get another date, January 26th. That was actually way better. The students were happy with it. We didn't think that, we had to talk about it, to go at the middle of the term, but it worked. Watch out for 365 throttling. Microsoft free support was found to be lacking. This is in particular around the migration. I haven't talked about that, but there's a pre-migration piece that, so that you can do it all in a week. Where are we headed? Okay, I'm almost out of time here. Link online, this is why I went back to get licenses for faculty and staff. We're talking about giving everybody a link online. We think the grad students will be easy to move to Office 365. Gordie mentioned that, Google, you don't have a reset button or whatever. Microsoft will give us a warning, 30 days warning when they upgrade the tenant to the next version of Office 365. We can ask them to delay that by up to 60 days, but all tenants will be migrated by November. So we don't have much control over that. And once we get there, the idea is to bring up SkyDrive Pro Office Web Apps. So right now, we've only given the students Exchange Online. We have begun the process for email for alumni, put them in 365, and we expect someday we'll get to the faculty stuff. Okay, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. The thing is, Exchange, whether it was on-premise or in the cloud, is incredibly better than the environment that we had. So our constituents are happy with it. The integrated GAL is a fantastic resource. ActiveSync is magic. We had something called Notify Link. I don't know if anybody knows about that. Everybody hated it. But all this mobile stuff just works. It's really beautiful. And yeah, so we're excited about this. There's a couple people here. There's a whole bunch of people here. Anyways, Matt Tremblay, who's sitting over here, if you have any questions about ADFS or DirSync or any of that stuff, he's here. Mike Ferguson's not here. He did the migration scripts, but his protege, Colin Soule, is here, and he'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Mike Smith from Queen's University. So I think for keeping you online, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I've synthesized from this list. And the question that's really bubbled to the top of the mind, what I took from the talk was, it starts off about email migration, but then you get things like license negotiations and calendar migration, and Eddie referred to it as a bit like a marriage. It's the migration isn't the end, it's not even the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning, to quote Winston. So here's the question. Should those of us who haven't gone to the cloud be reconsidering? And maybe Mike and Gordie could each say a few words to that question.
Do you want me to start, Mike?
Yeah, please.
You're telling your past self, some advice. What would you say?
From our perspective, again, regardless of where and what the service is, it's incumbent on the university to fulfill their due diligence, and specifically with regards to the risk of a foreign national government or other type of body obtaining unauthorized or unknown disclosure to your information. We were reviewing several federal privacy commissioner documents and other legal sources that essentially suggested that the risk is actually no greater if your information is stored wherever around the world as compared to within your own shop or across the street. And that's because there is a lot of ongoing information sharing between foreign national governments, and especially in the name of national security or for criminal investigation basis, and there are means to obtain this information, and so you're actually at no greater risk. So if anything, the recent news about PRISM and the Canadian government's throttling and monitoring of information actually would support what we had been seeing all along, that the risk isn't any greater. So that said, it's up to you then to ensure then that the other means, so that providers, infrastructure controls, the security of the information in transmission, and whatever other means that you need to fulfill. Again, if the service was in your own backyard, you have to be able to reconcile those requirements and ensure then that there's at least a minimal risk that's residual.
What about you, Mike? Would you advise those who haven't gone to the cloud to reconsider or carry on, or?
Well, I would say go. You know.
We have time.
Mike has nothing to hide, that's why.
We have time for a question or two. Yes, in the back.
Mike, just a couple questions. What version of on-prem exchange do you have in place?
2010.
So you're at exchange 10.
Yes.
And will that, what's left on-prem after your migration is done? Will you'll continue to have on-prem exchange?
Well, our migration is done at this point, in the sense that, you know, we've moved all of our, in fact, we've shut down the old systems. They're done. Okay. How quickly we will go in the next phase, because we do think that more will end up in the cloud. But one reason, the primary reason why Microsoft was our choice, was once we had Exchange Online, having Exchange in the cloud makes that transition, you know, there's nothing to it, right? And having lived through, I don't know if anybody's done an email, like in a past life, email migration. Like, you don't want to do them more often than you have to, that's for sure.
But you have are your CAT servers and your mailbox servers still running?
Yes.
On-prem stuff?
Yes.
And that will continue to run?
It will, but if we move everybody to Office 365, we won't need that stuff. Matt, yeah.
And can your cloud users, like when we're considering it as well, but the concern is again calendaring, right? So,
Yes.
you know, across two different administrative departments, we want to book a meeting, we need to be able to see each other's calendar.
Yes.
Can anybody who's in the cloud now
Yes.
see a calendar and vice versa?
Yes. The only restriction that I remember from the testing, you can't have a delegate, if somebody is a delegate for your calendar, they can't be in the cloud while your mailbox is on-prem.
I figure those would move them in groups.
Yeah.
Like a team.
Yeah.
So in my interest in keeping you on time, I'm going to formally end the presentation, but I'm sure that both Mike and Gordie would mind staying a few minutes if you'd like to talk to them afterwards or get a hold of them later. Thanks very much, Mike. You were on time.
Really? He's still